All right. Hello, everyone. I'll give everyone a minute to find the tab, as you may have had this in your background. Just double check I'm coming through all good. Yep, fantastic. All right, let's kick things off. Yeah, thank you again for jumping on this call. So yeah, very excited to be presenting with Adam from DataTrue today. So we're going to be running through a few different topics. This is just a rundown of what we're going to be covering. Disruption around campaign measurement is a big topic that we're going to run through. We're also going to talk about what you need to know about online privacy, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand. There's a lot of change happening in our part of the world. We're going to be covering off some server-side tracking pieces as well, and also data governance and everything that you need to know. So let's dive into it. Yeah, so this is really pretty exciting for me and Adam to be here. We're sort of sharing two different parts of an equally complicated puzzle. So RescueMetrics, what we do is we protect all of those third-party tags, essentially convert them into first-party tags. So our work is really getting more human, real data back into your platforms, and DataTrue works on making sure that all of your tagging and infrastructure and compliance is set up in the right way. So we really think we've got two parts of this equation, and yeah, it's very exciting for us to share this with you today. So let's start with a little bit about your data and hopefully some things that give you some new information for you. So we're hearing a lot about the cookie apocalypse. Everyone's talking about when Google's going to sunset their third-party cookie tracking, and this is all obviously around audience and marketing and advertising. But we think equally as large a challenge is the signal loss issue that's happening today, and sort of getting worse and worse. So really every red different blob here you see is a different thing that can have an impact on marketers, brands and analytics. So obviously that 14 there, iOS 14 from 2019, as I'm sure everyone's aware, had some pretty big changes in our space. Reducing initially third-party cookies, but then often first-party cookies as well, meaning when a iOS user comes back to the website, if that's outside the 7 days, they look like effectively a brand new visitor, and in some cases 24 hours as well. So we're also going to be talking about all of the other signal loss technologies. So you've got things like ad blockers, which essentially block any third-party script from loading. So that includes, Google, Facebook, or anything, any modern marketing technology. We'll talk about VPNs as well. There's a huge thing, a huge different amount of technology that can actually hinder the data from coming through correctly. So what we see in our space when we're actually seeing this data being affected, there's a bunch of different areas. Here are some of the biggest ones. So obviously we have just media spend in general looks like it's underperforming. So that's often when the actual media codes don't load correctly. We're finding that for iOS users, they're typically about 18 to 20% more, they spend more in terms of basket size. So when they're becoming more difficult to actually target, that can be an issue. So we're finding that, those less affluent users harder to reach and measure. We're seeing that user journeys are blocked, just because when people are returning to the site, obviously, if you don't have that journey information, can make things like measuring upper funnel activity really difficult. Obviously, poor remarketing, this is something we get with almost every one of our customers as a pain point. The pools are dwindling and they're getting worse. And we've even seen some customers completely give up on remarketing, but we're here to tell you that it doesn't have to be the case. Obviously, a lot of modern marketing technology at the moment, a lot of automation. Again, if the signal can't be met on the other side, makes it really difficult to do that in a really positive way. Return on ad spend decreasing. This is again a big one that we hear from customers, specifically on Meta. So we're going to talk a little bit about today on why that's happening and what we're seeing from our data sets as well. We'll also talk about A/B testing bias. A lot of that technology uses third-party scripts to load, and they are also affected. And so, yes, let's talk about ad blockers in particular, because this is something that I just don't think gets enough coverage. I don't think people are talking about it enough, and it has a pretty big impact on marketers and the analytics that they're using. So really, we're seeing a huge increase in ad blocker usage. So it's about 28% in the past 5 years. As you can see from 2014 up to where we are today. And ad blocking obviously is all the different types of ad blocking technology, but also the Brave browser as well, which has one of the most aggressive forms of ad blocking baked into the browser. So it's very common in this part of the world, Asia Pacific, and we're seeing that almost half of people under 39 are using ad blocking technology. Obviously, young men are skewed as well for that demographic. And really, when we look at the research around why people are using ad blockers, it's really around just blocking ads on the internet. So it's around the annoyance. There's too many. They're not relevant. This is all the feedback that we get. I think a lot of the time that's what the technology is designed to do. But obviously, when that comes to the website, that wipes out a lot of the data as well that marketers use to run the function. So we have about 110 million users through our platform every month globally. So we can actually see what those rates look like. So I think this isn't too small for everybody. So just some of these stats here. So New Zealand has a very high ad blocker rate, about 42%. Australia is sitting at about 36%. US about 38%. And so this is signal loss that we're seeing across all these markets. I think we have users coming through from almost every part of the world. I don't know if we've had our first Antarctica one yet, but yeah, almost every country we've got some users coming in, and these are the rates. And as we showed before, they're going up and up and up. There's a bit of a fallacy that people using so this is the kind of this is including different signal loss as well. So we're including some Safari usage in there as well. Thanks for the question, Ryan. And then there's this bit of a fallacy that AdBlock users don't buy anything. So we have a connector into GA4 where we can actually see AdBlock users as a custom audience. So when we look at that, using them as an audience, we can actually see that a lot of the time, especially for e-commerce sites, they spend more. So this is the average order value from normal users to rescue users. And yes, they obviously spend more, have a higher conversion rate as well. So we get to see all that data across our customers. So here's some industry insights. This is, to your point, Ryan, this is just taking out the signal, taking out any Safari usage. So this is just really from ad blockers by industry type. And as you'd probably expect, sort of electronics and gaming, 26%. Software as a service is 21%, e-commerce kind of 14%, and then we see everyone sort of the rest of these categories hovering around that kind of 12 to 15% mark. But this is pretty typical. As we mentioned, this isn't like different audiences respond quite differently, so it kind of depends on what that audience is per category. But these are typically the numbers that we see. So I'll just give an example of why, and this is when we hear people say that their Meta return on ad spend is going down and down and down. Part of it is this problem, and we just want to highlight this. So we'll just sort of run through a typical Meta or Facebook flow. So a lot of advertising doesn't actually, for Meta, for example, ad blockers don't block Facebook ads because Facebook works incredibly hard to make sure that their ads are shown. Same with Google ads; those actually appear for ad block users. But what happens is, so just say someone's got ad blocking technology, they see the Facebook ad, they click the ad. So inside of the Facebook Ads Manager, it actually says that a click has been registered, which is accurate. But then when that user actually gets to the website, the pixel can't load that they're there. So you have a situation where the ad manager has said, yes, there's been a click, and it is a real human click. Then when they get to the site, there's just a complete breakdown of that connection. So this is what, when we're talking about signal loss, this is exactly what we're talking about. So what happens in this situation? If someone actually who clicked that ad then goes through and buys, that buying signal doesn't go back into the Facebook Ads Manager. So what it looks like is that there's lower return on investment because there has actually been sales through those different ads and different campaigns, but it doesn't actually get recorded. Now, on the analytics side of things, either one of two things happens. If Google has picked up the conversion, it looks like that person has just appeared on the site. So Google just defaults it into direct inside of the source attribution. Occasionally they'll put it into unknown or other sort of sources, but mainly it hits into direct. Or if it's a really aggressive ad blocker, it doesn't record it at all. So you'll get a discrepancy between what GA is saying, or whatever analytics tool that they're using. Adobe is affected just in the same way, and what the actual sales look like. So this is a big problem we see for a lot of our e-commerce businesses, and also our SaaS companies that we work with, trying to measure MQLs and SQLs. There's just a big disconnect for what that looks like. So yeah, obviously we trying to get all of those signals back into the ad platform, because as we know, Facebook's built a $1 billion algorithm to try and make sure that they can get efficient clicks for marketers. And then this is essentially what we see. So we have a fewer remarketing audiences because we don't really know what they've done on site. That also can be a hindrance. Like if someone actually does buy, you kind of want to exclude them from, potentially exclude them from getting any more advertising. So that doesn't happen in this case. And yeah, as we mentioned, we can't really bid correctly inside this platform, and reporting is just completely skewed in these cases. The other challenge that we see is with A/B testing software. So again, this is technically it's JavaScript based and it's third party. It's not actually first party. So what happens a lot of the time if people are using A/B testing tools, that variant, which is why you use that technology, gets blocked from anyone using ad blockers. So what happens is, especially if you've got a young male audience skew or a high ad blocker skew, they don't see the variant. So we have a situation where it looks like that the variant is performing well. Then brands will put it live on their site, and then the performance tanks, and they wonder what happens or why that happened. In a lot of cases, it can be down to this, just because there wasn't actually a clear test that was done. So we always investigate those when we look at them. And this is an interesting example. So this is actually from a large retailer. They're using dynamic yield, which is, I actually just saw a LinkedIn post from them just before, saying that they are now the world leading from the Gartner report. Dynamic yield, because again, it's JavaScript based, for the aggressive ad blockers like uBlock, which is about 8% of a lot of markets, the entire website breaks. So this retailer uses dynamic yield to see, should we go 3 different products, or should it be 6? And they're using that to work out how the website should be structured. It completely breaks to the point where people can't actually buy. So it just completely, blows up the website. So for retailers and really anyone who's focused on the conversion happening on site, this can be a real issue. Now, this doesn't happen with all of these technologies, but some of them, it has a really big impact on the website. Cool. But so there is a way to see it. So we recommend brands and agencies do this, and you can actually do this for all of your clients as well. So essentially just download uBlock, which is one of the most prevalent ad blockers. When you do that, up the top, this is just an example on Chrome here, you can actually click the extension. When that opens up, you can, as soon as you click it, it actually just shows you live what tags are being blocked in real time as well. So everything red that you can see there is a tag that just didn't get a chance to load. Everything in yellow is sometimes loads, and everything green has gone through as it should. So if you look in here, you've got Bing, we've got Facebook, everything inside the tag manager container. So essentially that's like fish in a barrel for this technology that just looks at everything in there and just goes, we'll rip that out. And then, you can sort of see Telium in there as well, and many other pieces of technology. And that's why that A/B testing tools, they're in there as well. So real big issue, especially if, most brands will load a lot of their tags through Google Tag Manager or Segment or some tag manager tool like that. Again, fish in a barrel. It just takes that entire container away, which can have some pretty big impacts. So the good news, you can fix it, but there is a misconception that server-side tracking is just going to solve all these problems. And we have about 30% of our customers use server-side tracking as well. And so we can tell you for sure that it does not solve all the problems. It does help with certain things like page load speed, data privacy. Obviously, if you're sending sensitive information, it's perfect for that, for enrichment. But really, there's limited support with a lot of the different platforms that people are using. It can be pretty costly to get set up and implement. And I'll just show you what actually happens. So a lot of the time, before the data packet can actually be sent into the environment, if it looks and smells like an Google Analytics packet, it gets ripped out before it can actually get pushed into that environment. So we see this happening quite a bit. And again, if you do server-side tracking, there's a whole bunch of benefits of server-side tracking. We actually recommend it for a lot of customers. You can't actually see what's missing, so there's no reporting back to say it's doing 10% of the job or whatever it might be. So a real issue there. So yeah, I'll just run through kind of what is ordinarily happening with a lot of brands, just to really put it in context, just to sort of step through with a bit more detail what's going on, and then also what our technology does to support with that, and how brands can actually kind of test it out to see what the impact could be. So this is, we'll just use Rebel Sport as an example, and Pat, who's the head of marketing there. This is all of the third-party tech that Rebel are using. So they've got Google Analytics, obviously, to measure website performance, see how their campaigns are going, and ROI. Got a pretty big media stack: Meta, Google Ads, TikTok. They also use Klaviyo for their emails and website recording, and Hotjar for their A/B testing. So it's a kind of typical stack for a e-commerce retailer. So what's happening is anytime anything is third party, like all of these scripts and tags, all of these are loading from obviously Google from Google server, Meta from Meta server. So all of that for these technologies, they just throw up a network error. So they just don't allow any of those tags to load as they should on the website. So what RescueMetrics does is we convert all those tags into their own first-party environment. And the real key part of this is we add a layer of encryption. So essentially, it's one packet going to the site, looks like it's part of the website, and inside of that is the exact same tagging setup. So it means that brands don't have to do a complete overhaul of their tagging setup, or they don't have to move to a new platform. We're really just trying to bridge that gap. So just more data appears in GA, more data appears in Meta as it should. And for normal e-commerce retailer, in this case, is about 19% of users are protected through this technology. And finally, for us, we're built for privacy, so we only rescue consented data. And I'll let Adam talk next about privacy and consent and what the new legislation is looking like in Australia, and obviously New Zealand typically follows suit from that. So we'll run through that. But really, our position is we want the users to choose, give them the power, rather than browsers like Apple or technology like ad blockers. And our solution, we zero storage. We don't process any of this data. It's the exact same tag, just loading through a different mechanism, and we integrate with all of the leading consent management platforms. So that is it from me. I will pass it over to Adam now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. So just in terms of a little bit about the macro trends facing us currently. So according to Gartner, 75% of the world's going to be governed by data protection laws within the next year. So this is something that companies clearly cannot ignore. In terms of CMPs, it's very much a fast-growing segment of the market. There's significant investment in CMPs. However, the quality of these deployments, as well as whether or not they're actually checking that they're on 100% of pages, is not always occurring. In fact, I'd say that most of the partners and people that we've talked to don't have their CMPs across all of their pages. Often there's a significant investment in terms of these CMPs as well as CDPs. However, there's minimal investment insofar as quality assurance and making sure that they're running correctly. The next point is really around companies and government, and what we'd say here is that they're typically as safe as their weakest tech partners, and that applies for their respective clients, but also their staff. And so what we're talking about in terms of that is, on average, partners are deploying between 30 and 90 technologies across their web properties. And that can be anything from, programmatic ad stacks to your TikToks to your ad verification companies, etc. However, in the overall marketplace, according to the IAB, there's around 3,800 APIs. And what that simply means is that to make sure that all of these various third-party partners are compliant from a data compliance perspective, it's very hard to make sure that A, that's occurring, and B, that they can demonstrate that compliance. And we'll touch on piggyback tagging and things like that a little bit later. From a data posture perspective, Australia and New Zealand are typically around 5 years behind Europe and probably around 3 years behind North America. So now just a quick overview of the US and North America. Obviously, privacy compliance is very much maturing, and especially since the Sephora issues were handed out, there's been various regulations that have been passed within, the likes of Virginia, Colorado, Connecticut, etc. And now very much partners and global websites in US are prioritizing this area. Prior, clients and data mapping was the key focus, and there was a focus very much around PII that websites already had. Now they're looking at all of the moving parts, and they understand that these websites are continually changing. They are live environments, and they are collecting data on a real-time basis. So now it's very much focused on analytics as an integrated experience. And now they're focused more so on examples such as broken pages, load times, rendering of images, layout, videos, and all the other elements that are interacting with the browser. In terms of from a local Australian, New Zealand perspective, there's some nuances and challenges. Clearly there's a scale challenge. They're smaller markets and therefore smaller teams, smaller budgets, and therefore, in terms of investment, in terms of training L&D, it's a little bit more challenging. Laws and enforcement are obviously still evolving and a bit behind other key regions. There's a lack of subject matter experts. So because of the scale, you don't have as large teams, you don't have the training. Sometimes you have misaligned KPIs at a coalface level versus C-suite, and data protection can be managed across multiple departments typically. And because it's shared responsibility, sometimes the accountability is somewhat diluted. The other thing too is sometimes companies at a local level are looking for quick, low-cost solutions so that they can tick the box and appear compliant, but they're not really investing possibly where they should be. Education is required, and that's something that we're very focused on, along with Tim and the RescueMetrics team, of course, that ultimately we need to do as many of these webinars. We provide research, case studies, proof of concepts and audits. So at the moment we're developing some lists in terms of the state of the markets, and because our technology can track all of the technologies, we can provide complete transparency to the wider community. That said, from a local New Zealand perspective, there's a huge opportunity obviously, and for subject matter experts to grow their skills, there's a huge opportunity from a career perspective. Now, if we take a step back and just look a little bit at the commercial value of privacy, there's obviously the client retention side of things. We know that, demonstrated compliance leads to ultimately customer trust. And more importantly, we can see that there's some recent examples such as Optus, Medibank, Latitude, for example. There's been a material impact on brand equity value, but also there's been a material impact in terms of market cap and share prices. So there is a real knock-on impact. Now, if we look at a little bit at the, growing consumer global data rights awareness, now consumers globally are asking these typical questions. They're becoming very much aware of the types of things that relate to them on a personal level. So they're asking questions like, delete all traces of my data, only use my data where I've expressly agreed to have that consent. Sometimes consumers are asking for copies of data and right to access. They're saying, okay, only store what's absolutely necessary for the intent that I've signed up to, and do not share my data with any third parties, especially data brokers. And finally, a key one is around provenance. So what we're talking specifically here is, if it really relates to where the consumer is a citizen. So let's say, for example, there's a French consumer in Australia, and they're on a Australian-based company's website. Ultimately, they, as a consumer, are governed by GDPR, not the Australian data law rights. So that's something that sometimes gets lost within this region, for example, but it's very important. Now looking a little bit at privacy posture. So historically, those companies that have focused on privacy posture have asked questions historically, such as, is my data capture legally allowed? Where and how long is it stored? And also, can we connect that disparate data from multiple sources and stitch together to get a better identity of the end consumer? Those having a forward-looking, privacy-embedded type of posture and, really being proactive are really asking typical questions like, can we monitor and delete data that we shouldn't collect? Can we use in a machine learning and AI model? Can we quantify segmentation and detect breaches and quantify those breaches in real time? Can we update records quickly? Can we update user journeys and change those? Importantly, can we demonstrate data compliance on a 24/7 basis, not just across PII, such as, name, address, driver's license, etc., but also health information, web, social, and financial information. And if you look at health, is probably a good example as well. You think about hospitals, medical records, these are really important, really. And the final point is, clearly data collection is growing exponentially. Customers ultimately trust companies to protect their information. And what we know is that once that trust is eroded, it's 10 times more expensive to win that customer back. Now, just a quick brief overview of the proposed Australian privacy bill, and it's probably related to New Zealand as well, of course, because ultimately a lot of it filters down to New Zealand shortly after. So a couple of key points. There's going to be clearly tougher breaches for repeated and serious breaches. There's stronger powers for the Information Commissioner. They're going to be ensuring companies communicate how people are impacted. And the key thing here is so that the end consumers can take quick and decisive action. So that might be changing credit cards, it might be driver's licenses, it might be health information, but ultimately empowering the end consumers where these breaches occur. Increased maximum penalties. So moving forward, it will be the greater of 50 million, 3 times the benefit realised, or 30% of turnover in the relevant period. And my personal opinion is that the Australian data laws and New Zealand will be more closely aligned with GDPR rather than CCPA. Now, switching tracks a little bit, just looking at a little bit of a tech guide for testing. So this is very much relevant to, you know, people on the call who might be users. They might be in a data analytics team, for example, or in the privacy risk team. But ultimately, you know, asking questions like, you know, does someone internally have a complete inventory of the MarTech stack? The vast majority of partners and people we talk to and companies don't have a complete inventory. And in fairness, there's some practical reasons for that. They might have evergreen content from 20 years ago. You know, there could be multiple changes in staff. There could have been all sorts of different valid reasons. The second one is ensuring most MarTech is delivered via your TMS. That's very helpful. Have you verified that the CMP is on every page? And as I said earlier, most of the times it isn't. Is your cookie notice accurate? Is it current? Is it demonstrating compliance? And are those preferences respected? And ultimately, from a PII perspective, is the data remaining in the correct geography? So, for example, it might be an Australian client, and they might require all of the PII to remain in the Australian region, for example. And so when we talk about, you know, audits of MarTech, here's just a simple screenshot of what our technology does. So it's very non-invasive, no code, and we can literally do audits and see everything that's happening across an entire website, whether they've got 100 pages or 10,000 pages. We can see the setup on every single page at a granular level. And here you can see down the bottom, some of these tags are only implemented on 1 to 4 pages rather than all 10 in this example. So there might be some issues there. Next is a suggestion around deploying the MarTech where possible via the TMS. And clearly anything outside of the TMS, it's very hard to see, you know, what's happening. And you really do need that complete transparency. And you need to understand what's happening in terms of piggyback tagging. And that is, you might have a directly deployed tag onto your website. However, there might be third parties piggybacking that tag that have no relationship with you as a company, but more importantly, they may be taking information such as geolocation or other, you know, user data that they shouldn't be, and then monetizing that information elsewhere. Next, just looking at CMP, and you know, here's just a simple screenshot. Most partners we work with will use the likes of OneTrust, TrustArc, but ultimately our technology works with all of these different CMPs. But simply put, here you can see that, you know, OneTrust in this example is not across all of the pages. So that may be an issue. Certainly it might be an incomplete implementation, or indeed that the functioning of the CMP is not running correctly. And again, we just say that, you know, is it running on all pages and is it running correctly? So that's why it's good to have very frequent tests running. And then, are your cookie consents up to date? Are they indeed accurate? Are they adhered to from a cookie consent perspective? And then here you can see, this is one of the simplest reports that our technology can deploy, but in essence, here you can see just an example in the top left-hand corner. This is for a news website. You can see that they're running 63 different tags, and you can see the different categories. So there's, you know, analytics, there's tag management, there's DSPs, SSPs, personalization, etc. You can see the tag count by vendor. You can then see also the tags found, and importantly, you can see average page load time. And this is very handy because the last thing you want to have is a non-seamless user experience. And then on the top right-hand side, you can see errors and warnings. So there might be misaligned data layers and DOMs. There might be missing tags, duplicated tags, renderings, all sorts of different things occurring, which is impacting the user experience. And then down the bottom, I won't go through all these, but it just highlights how complex a tag hierarchy can be. You can see at the top some of the implementations like Utiliums and Google, which have been implemented directly onto the website. But then you can see the various third parties piggybacking off those direct tags. And they can be, as I said earlier, ad verification. They can be TikTok, social media, LinkedIn. They can be DSPs, SSPs, verifications, and the like. And in terms, just a quick overview of DataTrue and what we do, we ensure that all of the analytics is that all of it is collected in a complete, accurate, and safe way. We have a tech tag audit toolset, and that runs across email, app, the full coverage of websites and emails and the like. We have integration toolsets, and this means that we have APIs into Looker Studio, Microsoft, and also other platforms. We also have a pricing compliance toolset, and simply that allows us to flag immediately any sort of data leakage issues. And that's great because obviously in all categories, but certainly more so in the likes of anything to do with finance, health, etc. They want to make sure that they run these tests on an hourly basis to make sure there's no sort of data leakage risk. And we work for a number of companies globally, government, all sorts of different technologies, and we have patents and support via the Australian government, etc. So I'll hand it back over to Tim.
Yeah, great. That, Adam, awesome as usual. Yeah, and obviously just a little bit about us and where we sit. As I mentioned, that 110 million users per month across a huge range of customers all over the globe and in Australia and New Zealand as well. We protect around 5.6 million of media spend per month. That's actually what's rescued through our platform. So yeah, now we have a chance for any questions, if there's any additional ones there. Open up the chat to see if we can. No, so we will be sending around the slide afterwards as well. Cool, Ryan. So the question there was just, do we work with platforms like HubSpot as well? Yeah, so we have API connector with them. So we support around 40 different platforms, and HubSpot is one of those. So typically you see with HubSpot, it actually builds a lot of the HubSpot attribution, works a lot better, and also works for if someone clicks an email inside of HubSpot and then they get to the website, if there's something that knocks off the HubSpot tag, it doesn't actually bridge that gap to say that user's come from an email. So yeah, that's typical with a lot of those different CRMs and email sending tools as well. Cool. And Dean, question there, for additional training, where would be the best place to look? I mean, yeah, so from our side, and probably Adam, you can answer a little bit of this as well. We've got a bunch of resources on our site that just kind of dives into a lot of detail around server side and all the different information in there. Any other spots from with our industry? Yeah, it's a kind of a pretty niche area for us on our side. But yeah, I'll see if Chloe's got any thoughts, but I'll pass it over to Adam for yeah, nice. I knew you'd have something there, Chloe. Join Measure Slack. But over to you, Adam, for the training.
Yeah, there's some good resources, especially there's resources like the DAA in the US, for example, Digital Analytics Association. They're quite good for those analytics folk out there looking to get training and sessions involved from a personal perspective. From a DataTrue perspective, we have teams across APAC, as well as Europe and North America in terms of customer success. So we're always doing demo calls and webinars and case studies and all those sorts of things. So certainly if you have any questions at all, just hit us up, and we're happy to share that information as well.
Yeah, we had another question on how we can actually see the blocked audience. So with our tech, any Google Analytics packet that we send through, we actually tag it as a RescueMetrics packet. So it means that inside of GA, you can actually filter by the RescueMetrics audience. So that's where you can actually see genuine, MQLs, SQLs. You can see revenue and everything like that. So yeah, often brands will use that as a bit of a validator for that traffic coming in as well. So that's how we get that accuracy there. Nice. There's a bit of.
Thank you, Chloe.
Perfect. So we'll keep the chat open a little bit longer if there are any other questions. Of course, you'll have me and Adam's details as well, so you can reach out to us if there's anything from the information that we send through that you want a bit more detail on. Feel free to reach out. But yeah, obviously a lot of awesome tools on Adam's side, and we run a free pilot for any customer as well. So yeah, that's available to everybody on this call too. All right. Well, I think we will wrap it there. Brilliant. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we'll send all this information around, and we'll keep everyone in touch. We'll keep in touch if we've got any other sessions like this, and you can feel free to join those in the future as well. So thanks a lot.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Awesome.